Hello everyone, welcome again to the channel. Today I want to share with you some stories related to the current conflict in Ukraine, and let's start with the first one. This is a story saying that Western arms supply to Ukraine offered on Darknet, and this was already reported before. I even mentioned it in previous article that there was a history of Ukraine selling weapons to different parties. This has been already documented. It's nothing new. But only recently, again, Interpol brought up the subject that some of these weapons that are being supplied to Ukraine will find its way to the hands of criminals or some other groups around the world. And this is concretely an investigation by the team of RT. This team of journalists were trying to find these weapons on the dark net. The dark net is some kind of network that is more private, is harder to track down people on this kind of network. But regardless of the technical side of this, they said they were able to talk about or try to negotiate about some systems, including Javelin, NLAW, anti-tank systems, Phoenix Ghost, and Switchblade explosive drones. And of course, they mentioned that it is even possible that these people didn't have the weapons, or maybe they could not supply them after payment. So they say it's possible. They didn't complete the purchase. So they were just saying, mentioning about the availability of all these. They say what they were asking 4,000 for a Phoenix Ghost loitering munition. They say they wanted to buy Claymore anti-personnel mines, but they say that those were out of stock. And here you can see kind of the screenshot of a Switchblade 300 drone, kamikaze drone. They're asking 4,000 for it. Has some photos. They have 3 in stock. So it's apparently it's a very well made store, online store. And then they were talking about some of the logistics, about how the things they buy could be deployed to a specific location and all related things. And then they were mentioning all different kinds of weapons that were available. For example, here you can see images for an NLAW, the AT-4 anti-tank weapon, another one that is called Panzerfaust. So they have all kinds of weapons there, not just Western-made weapons. They just point out that the NLAW system was being sold for 15,000. Yeah, and they are mentioning here exactly what I was saying, that the Interpol said that this will lead to some problems with weapons coming into the market. So yes, that is a big problem. But even recently, when there was one of the biggest weapon aid packages, one of the legislators in the US tried to include some kind of oversight to supervise how weapons are being delivered and all this, but it was rejected. So this is a problem for everyone. That's what people don't realize, that the availability of these high technology weapons available for anyone who can pay for them is concerning. For example, in Mexico, it is known that drug dealers have very advanced weapons and they use them against the government. So this is also a problem, for example, potentially for any country, not just for Russia or for Ukraine or for any country in Europe. It is possible to be used anywhere in the world, these weapons. So that's very concerning and definitely something negative coming out of this whole conflict. This is another article that I thought it was very interesting. They say China may be plotting moon takeover. And they say Chinese astronauts are busy learning how to destroy other nations' satellite, according to Bill Nelson. He is the NASA's administrator. He says in 2035, Beijing might finish the construction of its own moon station, starting experiments later, a year later. So he's basically saying that the nature of China's space program is military, and he believes that this program will have the main goal of claiming the entirety of the moon for China, and that they are trying to work in ways to keep everyone else out of the moon. They say especially there is a competition for the South Pole because there is the potential for water there, which could have different implications. So they are also mentioning how China stopped collaborating with NASA, and they also mentioned how after the Ukraine conflict, also Russia stopped communicating and collaborating with NASA, and as a consequence of the military conflict in Ukraine and all the sanctions and everything, now Russia and China are collaborating and they're working together. So this is more probably unforeseen side effects, but is certainly nothing positive for the United States and for their allies. But they brought this upon themselves, so it was self-inflicted wound, self-inflicted damage. And I wanted to mention something about this particular fact that they say that Chinese astronauts are busy learning how to destroy other nations' satellites, and I thought, okay, so how do they know they're doing that, or what is the reason for that claim? And I found another article that says that China is going to build some space defense system, and the main thing is that according to this article, they plan to track and attack asteroid to change its orbit as early as 2025. But then the article goes on to say about different kinds of activities they want to do, and how they will be able to use this also to protect spacecraft. So what I see here is that they are going to have some ground-based and space-based elements. In my opinion, this could have dual use. This is what could happen. That's why they think this could be used to attack other countries' vessels, satellites, or other things. I think it's possible. I just think that they are trying to project themselves into the Chinese. I'm not saying the Chinese will not be interested in something like that. I can see a lot of reasons why China will want to keep the moon for themselves and keep everyone else out. That will be something very positive for China. I'm not saying it won't happen, but maybe this is why they were saying that they are trying to work in these kind of systems. Let's see how that works. And this one is again coming from Zelensky's government, from Ukraine's government. They say that they plan to attack the Crimean Bridge, which recently came into the news because there was some kind of fire near this area. Later, the Russian authorities say they were doing some kind of testing for the police force or something, so apparently nothing happened. But the main thing is that he says that Alexei Arestovich, he says that Ukraine still has plans to strike Europe's longest bridge connecting Crimea to Russian Krasnodar region. And he basically is just making threats. Ukraine doesn't have the technology, missiles to be able to reach there, and even the missiles, if they were able to reach that area, it is unlikely that they will be able to inflict considerable damage in the bridge. So that's just them threatening to do it. Is aggressive behavior. That's all it is at the moment. I'm not saying it's absolutely impossible, but probably the Russians have already some kind of defense system in place to protect the place, because it's critical for Crimea and for Russia. So this is the location of the bridge. Crimean Bridge is here. And I was just trying to see how far is, for example, from Zaporizhia, which is the closest Ukraine-controlled city. That is 348, so 350 kilometers, 216 miles. So that's very far from this area. So this is Dnipropetrovsk. This is 345 kilometers. Zaporizhia is a little bit further south, but is almost all this area is controlled by Russia. Not Zaporizhia itself, but I don't think there will be any other area that will be. For example, Nikolaev is even further. 350 kilometers, 200 miles. So I don't see currently that Ukraine has the kind of missiles that will be able to reach this area. So that's what I think. That currently they don't have the technology to do it, but that doesn't prevent them from making threats. So that's the current situation on this story. And of course there is the issue of the fact that they need to overcome any airspace defenses that the Russian Federation has in all this area of Crimea. Probably they have some S-400s in this area, so I doubt that if they send a missile, it won't be intercepted by these kind of defense systems. This one was an article that I thought it was kind of supporting something I have been saying before in previous videos, is the fact that training for Ukrainian troops is one of the key elements why the Ukrainian army is not able to win in the battlefield. And in the long run, that's why the Ukrainian army is not going to win any conflict. They haven't been able to basically win any battle, not even a single battle. They have had some success in skirmishes, but very limited use, some success defeating particular small groups, but nothing that create some kind of effect on the course of the war. And they are mentioning some article from this magazine that is called Foreign Policy, and they are just discussing the fact that the training is lacking. There is not enough training for the military in Ukraine, so they are even unable to train them as fast as needed, and they want the military systems, the weapon systems, to becoming even faster. But this just doesn't work, because it's impossible to train people faster. Maybe they can chip something faster, like some weapon systems, but then people will not be able to use them effectively. There's some anecdotal testimonies of people that say that people in the battlefield were so untrained that they had to find instructions in YouTube on how to use some of the systems, and there is also, of course, very negative. It's not possible to have an effective army if you don't have proper training. They mentioned the fact that maybe Ukrainian military can train also their pilots, but this is even harder. Training a pilot to use a specific fighter jet will take months, if not years. So again, it's a race against time, and Ukraine doesn't have time. That's what has already been decided. I already forecasted that the Ukrainian army will soon collapse and will stop fighting altogether. Some mass surrendering will take place sooner or later. Probably sooner than people expect. It is impossible to predict when exactly will this happen, but it will be sudden. It will not happen progressively. It will just come a point of the breaking point, and after that, everything will just collapse. They even mentioned some kind of training program that the United Kingdom is trying to do, to train 10,000 soldiers every 120 days. So every 120 days, that's 4 months. And training a soldier for 4 months is not going to produce a very effective soldier. Like I mentioned before, training a soldier takes years, even the most basic training, but they think something will come out of this. It's just more people getting killed. Unfortunately, young people, old people, everyone who is being recruited, they're just going to be used as cannon fodder. That's very unfortunate, and is very negative. And at the last part of this story, they just mentioned the fact that Ukraine was never willing to suit for peace, even from the Minsk agreements. They say that there were even some statements from former Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko, who says that the main goal of Ukraine with the protocols, the Minsk agreements, was to use the ceasefire to buy time and create more powerful armed forces. So this is the truth. That's what they wanted. They never had any real intentions to have peace, and I think that's also true right now. I just recently saw a video with an American analyst, and he was just admitting that if a peace treaty comes or some kind of ceasefire comes, he says that then the US and its allies, NATO and everyone, they should use this pause to build up more weapon stocks, more ammunition, more everything, training, so it will not stop. That's what is supporting my view that when I just made this video about the peace process in Ukraine and how it will be implemented, I think that Russia should have to occupy the entirety of Ukraine and create some legal framework for a permanent military occupation, military bases, to ensure that Ukraine doesn't rearm, and that in perpetuity there will not be any army in Ukraine. There's not much that Russia can do to prevent the West from rearming or creating more weapon systems, more weapon stocks, but at least they can control what is happening in Ukraine, and that's my assessment of how things are going to be. And then this comes also about this new microwave weapon that the United States is developing, and they are going to test it. It's a high-power microwave weapon, and there's another microwave system that they are trying to use to bring down enemy drone swarms. So how are they planning to use this weapon? They say they are going to use it to disable enemy electronics. So probably is kind of system to use as counteracting some kind of defense systems or any kind of weapon systems that use electronics. That's what it seems to be the intended use of this. And this comes for a new tendency in weapons to become more energy related. Like we recently made a video about this laser defense system that Israel has developed. So this is a trend for the future. More kind of energy weapons are being developed for the most advanced militaries. And I thought this was, my opinion. I think Finland and Sweden shouldn't join NATO. They shouldn't have even applied in the first place, but they applied regardless. And then Turkey says that they were going to block them unless they grant their demands, their conditions. So they signed this kind of memorandum that in principle says that Turkey will support their application if they will also address the issues that Turkey is concerned about. But as far as I know, this probably will never happen. So in my opinion, Finland and Sweden will never join NATO. Why? Let me tell you exactly why I say this is this is talking about Finland and Sweden. They say the agreement by Finland, Turkey and Sweden is about facilitating extradition, but mentions that it takes place in accordance with European extradition agreements. So let's go more into detail about that. They say that in particularly about Finland, they say the country has received 12 extradition requests from Turkey in the past 5 years, and they basically say surrendering Finland's own citizens is out of the questions. So let's pay attention to that. And they say when we talk about extraditions, it requires that the person has committed a terrorist crime or preparation for such a crime proven in Finland. So this is correct. I think Finland is doing the right thing. I mean, they want their laws to be respected. Is something that I already mentioned when there was a story about Afghanistan, that Afghanistan was doing something completely legal when the US wanted to have Osama bin Laden surrendered and extradited. The Taliban says, yes, prove that he's guilty and we will give it to you. And they had the audacity to say, okay, we don't need anything to prove, we will just start bombing your country. So in this case, in Finland, this probably won't happen. We won't see Turkey bombing Finland because they won't be able to surrender some terrorists or suspected terrorists. Because first of all, according to their laws, they won't be able to extradite any Finnish citizens, and if they are going to extradite anyone, it needs to be proven in a court of law that he's guilty of that before he's going to be sent abroad. Then it says, moreover, according to Finland's commitments, we cannot send anyone to the death penalty or torture. So this is significant because recently there was a news story about Turkey wanting to implement again the death penalty. I think this is also one of the reasons why Turkey will never join the European Union, because I think all states in the European Union cannot have the death penalty, and Turkey or Turkey's government seems to be interested in implementing this again. So that is negative development, and this will complicate absolutely everything, because if that is the case, then even if it is a non-citizen of Sweden or Finland, they will never send it to Turkey, because there is the possibility that they will be sentenced to death, or there is the risk that they will be tortured, so that will never happen. They say even in Sweden, Swedish law is applied by independent courts. Swedish citizens are not extradited. Non-Swedish citizens can be extradited at the request of other countries, but only if it is compatible with Swedish law and the European Convention. So it is the same. It's the same, and basically this is what happened. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says that he is going to threaten to block the process again should Ankara's demand not be met. So this is a block process. It will absolutely never be completed. There is a lot of legal challenges for this, and there doesn't seem to be, in my opinion, there doesn't seem to be a place for compromise. I don't think Sweden or Finland will compromise over this. Some of these people that are deemed terrorists, some of them are already Swedish citizens, as far as I know, so they will never be extradited. And Turkey will never remove their objections, and Sweden, Finland will never join NATO. This is, in my opinion, something positive. Like I said from the start, I don't think Finland and Sweden should have joined NATO or should have even applied. I'm in favor of peace. I think this organization, military organization, NATO, is not a defensive organization. It's an offensive, aggressive organization. Military organizations should not take place in this modern world, but there seems to be the tendency to creating even more of them. I already made a recent video about the intentions of the US to create a Middle Eastern NATO, and they also have intentions to create some kind of NATO for the Pacific. So they want to multiply this failure, this failed organization that is not helping to create peace around the world. So that's my opinion. That's why I think this should not happen, and I see this as something positive. In my opinion, it's positive if NATO doesn't grow anymore, and even should be completely disbanded, but that's my opinion. And then lastly, I saw this interesting poll that they did on Ukraine. They say Ukrainians blame their own government alongside Russia for the conflict. So this is a poll that they did with about 1,000 Ukrainians, and this was done in June. And this is like a summary of the opinion of the people that they was in the poll. They say Russia's role in the conflict. 82% of people say that the country bears a great deal of responsibility after sending its troops into Ukraine. I think this is absolutely logical that people think that Russia has something to do. After all, they are the main one of the main actors in this conflict. So that was logical and expected. However, 70% of those surveyed say that the actions of the Ukrainian governments also contributed to the outbreak of the conflict. So that's a big percentage of people. And they say the US, together with NATO, has been labeled the culprit by 58% of the people in the poll. So people have their own opinion, and it's just interesting to see what people think. This has a lot to do with both the media and propaganda and people's own opinions and maybe knowledge of things. And this was also interesting. They say only 35% of people say they thought that the country's ultra-right nationalists or Nazis had any role to play in provoking the conflict. So that's a very low percentage in my opinion. And this is the part that was more surprising to me, is the fact that people say 66%, that's the majority of people, say that they think Kiev is going to win back all of its lost land eventually and things will go back to normal. I'm sorry to say that for people's hope, but this will never happen. For different reasons, strategic reasons, security reasons, and the facts on the ground. Ukrainian army is losing. Like I already said, they will lose the war. The army will collapse suddenly, and the only solution for this is peace talks, and this will come through capitulation, because there doesn't seem to be any interest in the Ukrainian government to sue for peace before that happens. So then peace will be imposed, peace terms will be dictated. I already mentioned in a video how this could be implemented. And so yeah, Ukraine will never go back to what it was. This is very sad. I think is something that shouldn't have happened. I love Ukraine. I was in Ukraine several times. I have some Ukrainian friends, and it's very unfortunate that they allowed this to happen. I was in 2013, the first time I was in Ukraine, right exactly before all these things started. It should have stayed that way. It could have stayed that way, but then the CIA and the United States, the European Union had to start meddling with all things in Ukraine, and that was negative. A lot of thousands of people died in all this conflict since 2014, and it was completely unnecessary. The country suffered, people suffered. It was completely unnecessary, but there is no going back, unfortunately, for all this situation. So that's all I wanted to say for now. Let me know what you think about it, and as always, I ask you to please like the video, share it in social media, and subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you again very soon. Thank you for watching.